I knew something was wrong the moment Daniel stopped asking me to come over. Not because he said anything. He just stopped. For 3 years, Friday evenings had belonged to the same little routine. I would finish work, walk 6 blocks to the coffee shop near his apartment, and find Daniel already there, usually complaining about his week. Sometimes we talked until closing. Sometimes we barely talked at all. Then, one Friday, his chair stayed empty. I told myself he was busy. The next Friday, the same thing happened. By the third Friday, I stopped ordering his usual coffee. That was when his mother walked in. Claire was 46, and I had known her since I was 22. She had always been Daniel's mother first in my mind. The woman who remembered birthdays. The woman who sent you home with leftovers even after you said you weren't hungry. That evening, she stood near the counter holding a folded umbrella, shaking rain from the sleeve of her coat. She noticed me. "You're still here." I looked at the empty chair across from me. "Apparently." She smiled, but only for a second. Then she walked over. "Daniel told me you come here on Fridays." I frowned. "He did. Before he stopped talking to you." There was something about the way she said it, not accusing, not curious. "Careful." She sat across from me. The waitress came over, and Claire ordered tea. Then she looked at my cup. "Black coffee." I nodded. "No sugar." I looked up. "You remember that?" She shrugged. "You've been drinking it for years." I laughed quietly. I didn't know anybody noticed. Claire's fingers moved around the edge of the teacup. I notice more than people think. For some reason, I didn't know what to say after that. My phone buzzed beside my hand. I glanced at it. Nothing important. A promotional message from a store. I turned the phone face down. Claire noticed. "You expecting someone?" "No." The answer came too quickly. She looked at me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Neither am I." We sat there listening to the rain hit the windows. I had spent a lot of evenings alone lately. Not dramatically alone. Just enough to realize I had started typing messages and deleting them before anyone could receive them. Sometimes I would open Daniel's chat, write everything okay, stare at it, and put my phone away. That night, Claire reached into her handbag. She placed a small envelope on the table between us. My name was written on it. I stared at it. "What is that?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she folded her napkin into a smaller square. Then another. "Daniel asked me to give you this." I looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. Why didn't he give it to me himself? Her eyes lifted to mine. "Because he was afraid you would ask questions." A cold feeling moved through me. "Questions about what?" Claire looked toward the rain-dark window. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "Before you open that, you need to understand something." I waited. Her voice dropped. "Whatever happens after tonight, don't tell Daniel I was the one who brought you into it." I looked at the envelope again. And suddenly, the empty chair across from me didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like someone had been sitting there all along, waiting for me to notice. I didn't open the envelope that night. I carried it home instead. That was probably the first mistake. The second was answering Claire's call the next morning. "Did you read it?" "No." A pause. "Good." I sat on the edge of my bed, turning the envelope over in my hands. "Then why did you give it to me?" "I didn't say I wanted to." Her voice sounded tired. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Come by this afternoon." "Why?" "I'll explain." "You always say that." "I know." There was something almost like a laugh in her voice. "Almost." When I arrived, Claire was standing in her kitchen trying to fix a cabinet hinge. She had one hand on the screwdriver and the other holding the door in place. "You know," I said, Most people call someone when they can't fix something. She looked over her shoulder. Most people don't like admitting they can't fix something. I took the screwdriver from her. You're going to break it. I've lived in this house longer than you've been alive. That doesn't mean you know how cabinets work. She stared at me. Then she smiled. Still arrogant. Still correct. It was the first normal conversation we'd had in weeks. That almost made it worse. I fixed the hinge while she made tea. The kettle clicked off. She poured mine without asking. Black. No sugar. I watched her set the cup beside me. You remember everything, I said. Not everything. She sat across from me. Just the things people repeat. I looked down at the tea. There were things I had started noticing about her that I had no business noticing. The loose strand of gray near her temple. The way she rubbed her thumb against the side of her cup when she was nervous. The fact that she sometimes looked at me, then seemed to remember who I was. Daniel's friend. Her son's friend. 26 years old. She was 46. That should have made everything simple. It didn't. Claire looked toward the hallway. Daniel's been involved with people he shouldn't be. What kind of people? The kind who don't like being told no. I stopped moving. And the envelope. Names, messages, things he was supposed to keep hidden. Why give it to me? She looked at me. Because he trusts you. Then why doesn't he talk to me? Her eyes dropped. Because he knows you're the one person who might actually help him. I didn't like how that sounded. I didn't like even more that part of me wanted to. Claire leaned back. My husband used to say I worried too much. You were married. She nodded. 10 years. What happened? She stared into her tea. Eventually, we became very polite strangers. That answer stayed between us. I wanted to ask more. I didn't. Maybe because I understood it. Maybe because lately, I had been surrounded by people and still felt like nobody would notice if I disappeared for a week. Claire looked at me. You shouldn't get involved. You invited me here. I know. That's confusing. I know. She smiled faintly. Then, without thinking, she reached across the table and straightened the cuff of my sleeve. Her fingers barely touched my wrist. She stopped. So did I. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then she pulled her hand back. Sorry. It's fine. She nodded. But she didn't look away immediately. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me, and neither of us knew what to do with that. After that afternoon, Claire stopped calling. Not completely. Just enough for me to notice. 3 days passed. Then 5. I told myself it was better that way. I went back to the coffee shop on Friday, sat at the same table, and ordered the same black coffee. Daniel still wasn't there. Claire wasn't either. I checked my phone twice before admitting to myself that I was checking for her. That bothered me more than it should have. When she finally texted, it was only 4 words. Don't come to my house. I stared at the message. Then another appeared. Not tonight. I typed what happened. Deleted it. Typed, are you okay? Deleted that too. Finally. Okay. She didn't reply. The next morning, Daniel called. Where are you? Home. You've been talking to my mom. I sat up. Why? Just answer. A pause. Once. He breathed out slowly. Don't. Daniel. She's trying to help. She thinks she can fix everything. What's that supposed to mean? It means stay out of it. Then he hung up. I didn't hear from either of them for 2 days. On Monday, Claire appeared at the coffee shop. She looked different. Not dramatically. Just tired. She stood beside my table instead of sitting down. You're angry. I'm confused. That's fair. Are you okay? She glanced toward the window. Not really. I waited. She pulled out the chair but didn't sit. I shouldn't have told you any of this. Probably not. Her mouth tightened. I was scared. Of Daniel. She shook her head. Of what happens if you know too much. She finally sat. The waitress brought her tea without asking. Claire wrapped both hands around the cup. I want you to stay away from this. You said that before. I mean it now. Something in her voice made me believe her. That was the problem. I looked at her. And what about us? Her fingers stopped moving. Us. I immediately regretted saying it. I didn't mean. You did. Neither of us spoke. The coffee shop suddenly seemed too quiet. Claire looked down at the table. There shouldn't be an us. I know. You're Daniel's friend. I know. And I'm. She stopped. I waited. She looked at me. I'm old enough to know better. I almost smiled. That's not exactly an answer. It is. No, it's an excuse. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then softened. You make this very difficult. I haven't done anything. That's what makes it difficult. She reached for her tea. Her hand trembled once. Barely. I noticed. She noticed me noticing. Neither of us looked away. Then the bell above the cafe door rang. Daniel walked in. Claire immediately stood. The moment disappeared so quickly, I almost wondered if I'd imagined it. Daniel looked from her to me. Mom. Daniel. He glanced at the untouched space between us. Then at her face. Something changed in his expression. Not anger. Recognition. Can we talk? Claire nodded. She picked up her handbag. As she passed me, her hand brushed mine. She stopped. For half a second. Then she turned back. I didn't mean to make you think. Her voice faded. Think what? She looked at my mouth, then quickly back at my eyes. I don't know. Daniel was waiting near the door. Claire took one step toward him, then stopped again. She turned toward me. Neither of us moved. It was only a look. A long one. Close enough that, if either of us had leaned forward. She whispered, don't. I wasn't sure whether she meant don't follow her. Don't ask questions. Or don't make this harder. Then she walked away. And I stayed there, staring at the coffee she'd left behind, wondering which answer I was afraid of most. Claire asked me to meet her at the park, behind the library. No explanation. Just a time. 7:20. I almost didn't go. Then I saw her sitting on the old wooden bench beneath the sycamore tree, holding 2 paper cups between her hands. You came. You asked. She gave me one of the cups. Tea. I looked at it. How'd you know? You always drink it when you're nervous. I looked at her. Am I nervous? She smiled faintly. You tell me. We sat without talking. Cars moved along the street beyond the trees. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked twice and stopped. Claire stared at the ground. I told Daniel to leave you alone. Why? Because he thinks you're involved. I'm involved. Her eyes lifted. No. I can't just pretend nothing happened. You can. Can you? That stopped her. She looked away. The wind moved a strand of hair across her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear, then immediately did it again, as if she had forgotten she'd already done it. I don't want you getting hurt, she said. That's not the only reason. Her fingers tightened around the cup. No. The answer came quietly. I waited. She swallowed. I've been trying to figure out when this became something else. My chest tightened. What became something else? She looked at me. This. A long pause. You coming over, sitting in my kitchen, knowing how I take my tea, looking at me like you. She stopped. Like I what? She shook her head. Forget it. No. Please. Claire. She closed her eyes for a moment. I started waiting for your messages. That was all. She looked embarrassed saying it. Not ashamed. Just exposed. I would hear my phone and she gave a small, frustrated laugh. It's ridiculous. It isn't. It is. You think I haven't been doing the same thing. Her eyes met mine. Neither of us spoke. Then she said, that's exactly why it has to stop. I looked down at the cup in my hands. You don't mean that. She didn't answer. I could hear the clock from the library through the open window. Tick. 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 Finally, she said, I was lonely before you. I looked at her. She continued. Not the kind people notice. I had work, friends, Daniel, a house. Everything looked fine. Her thumb moved slowly along the rim of the cup. But then you started showing up. A breath. And somehow the quiet didn't feel so quiet. I didn't know what to say. So I told her the truth. I started finding reasons to stay longer. She looked down. Why? I almost answered. The word was there. Right behind my teeth. Because of you. Instead, I said, you know why. She turned toward me. We were closer than I realized. Her eyes dropped briefly to my mouth. Then back to my eyes. Neither of us moved. If you stay, she whispered, what are you asking me for? I had no answer. Or maybe I had one. I just wasn't ready to say it. Claire waited. And for the first time, the dangerous thing between us wasn't Daniel's secret. It was the question neither of us could afford to answer. The next morning, Claire didn't answer my message. I had written only, did you get home okay? Nothing else. By noon, I deleted it. By evening, I regretted deleting it. That became the rhythm for the next week. I would reach out. She wouldn't respond. I would decide I was done. Then I'd check my phone anyway. Daniel wasn't answering either. At work, I caught myself staring at the same spreadsheet for 10 minutes without reading a word. I finally shut my laptop. The problem wasn't that Claire had pulled away. It was that, for a few days, she'd let me believe she wasn't going to. And I had believed her. On Saturday, I went to the coffee shop. I told myself it was coincidence. It wasn't. Her usual table was empty. I ordered coffee and sat alone. 10 minutes later, someone sat across from me. Not Claire. A man I'd never seen before. Late 40s, maybe 50, gray at the temples, dark coat despite the mild weather. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, you know Claire. I put my cup down. Who are you? He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the window. She shouldn't have involved you. My stomach tightened. How do you know she did? He looked back at me. Because she always tries to protect people by telling them only half the truth. He stood. Ask her about me. Then he left. I sat there for several seconds. The coffee had gone cold. I didn't drink it. That night, Claire finally called. I answered immediately. Neither of us spoke. Was that him? I asked. Silence. Claire. Where did you see him? The coffee shop. Another pause. He's my ex-husband. I leaned back. You said you were divorced. I am. You never said he was involved. He wasn't supposed to be. Supposed to be. She exhaled slowly. His name was Mark. They had been married for 10 years. They'd separated after he started making promises he couldn't keep and disappearing when those promises became inconvenient. She had thought the marriage was finished. Apparently, Mark didn't agree. Daniel knew, I asked. Yes. And the envelope. He found documents Mark was trying to use against him. I stared at the wall. So Daniel wasn't hiding something from me. He was trying to keep you out of it. And you. She didn't answer. Claire, I was trying to keep you away from me. That hurt more than I expected. Why? Because I realized I was asking you to carry things that aren't yours. I chose to. You don't know what you're choosing. I know I'm choosing you. Silence. I immediately wished I hadn't said it. Claire's voice came softer. Don't say that. Why? Because I want to believe you. My throat tightened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I need some time. How much? I don't know. When will I see you? Another silence. I don't know that either. The call ended. I sat there with the phone still against my ear. I opened our message thread. Typed. I'll wait. Deleted it. Typed. I'm not going anywhere. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote. Call me when you're ready. I stared at the words. My thumb hovered over send. Then I locked the phone. The next morning, I walked past Claire's house on the way to work. Her curtains were open. The porch light was off. I stopped at the gate. For a second, I thought about knocking. I didn't. I kept walking. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life had forgotten to finish the sentence. 3 weeks passed. I stopped going to the coffee shop. I stopped checking Claire's street on the way to work. Mostly. Daniel eventually called. She's okay, he said. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a plate I'd forgotten to wash. That's good. She asked about you. I didn't answer. Daniel sighed. She didn't want you dragged into this. I know. Do you? I looked down. Yeah. Another pause. Then he said, she's at home. I knew what he meant. I didn't ask. That evening, I stood outside Claire's door for almost 5 minutes. I nearly left twice. Then I knocked. Footsteps. The door opened. Claire looked at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked tired. So did I. You came, she said. You told me not to. I know. Then I waited. Her eyes lowered. I noticed. She stepped aside. I walked in. The house looked exactly the same. That somehow made everything harder. She went into the kitchen. I followed. The kettle sat on the counter. You still drink tea? She asked. Sometimes. She smiled slightly. You're lying. Probably. She filled the kettle. Neither of us mentioned the 3 weeks. Neither of us needed to. Finally, she turned around. I ended it with Mark. I nodded. Okay. I mean completely. Okay. She looked frustrated. That's all you have. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't either. The kettle began to hum. Claire leaned against the counter. I thought if I pushed you away, I'd be protecting you. You were. She looked surprised. But it didn't make me stop thinking about you. I swallowed. I tried. She looked at me. I know. I told myself I was confused. You weren't. No. I rubbed my palm against the side of my jeans. I was scared. Of me. Of losing Daniel. Her expression changed. And losing you. She looked down. I was scared of that too. The kettle clicked off. Neither of us moved to pour the water. Claire spoke quietly. I kept thinking about what people would say. Me too. And the age difference. Yeah. And Daniel. Especially Daniel. She nodded. Then she looked directly at me. But none of those things changed what happened. I didn't answer. She continued. You made me feel like I was still someone outside of being a mother, outside of being someone's ex-wife, someone who could still. She stopped. I waited. Could still what? She smiled, embarrassed. Want something. That was the first time she had said anything that sounded like an admission. I stepped closer. Not touching her. Just close enough. I don't want to be something you regret. Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't look away. You aren't. Then what am I? She breathed in slowly. Someone I don't know how to fit into my life. I smiled. That's honest. It's the only thing I have. I reached for the kettle. She reached at the same time. Our hands touched. Neither of us pulled away. It was nothing. Just two hands on a kettle handle. Still, she smiled. A real smile this time. Tea, she asked. Tea. She poured 2 cups. We sat at the kitchen table. No promises. No grand decision. Just 2 people, finally sitting in the same room, without pretending they hadn't been waiting for it. After a while, Claire looked at me. Are you still afraid? Yeah. She nodded. Me too. A small silence. Then she smiled. Okay. And somehow, that was enough for tonight. 6 months later, I stopped checking the clock when Claire was late. That sounds small. It wasn't. For a long time, every delayed message had felt like a warning. Every missed call became something I had to explain to myself. Now, if Claire was 10 minutes late, I just waited. Sometimes she arrived carrying groceries. Sometimes she arrived annoyed at traffic. Once, she showed up at 8:47 in the morning because she'd forgotten her keys and blamed me for distracting her the night before. You weren't even there, I said. Exactly. You were distracting me by not being there. I laughed. She rolled her eyes. Things had become strangely ordinary. That was what I liked most. Daniel knew. It wasn't an easy conversation. He didn't shout. He didn't smile either. He sat across from us at his kitchen table and stared at his hands for a long time. Finally, he looked at me. Are you serious about her? I said yes. Then he looked at his mother. Are you? Claire didn't answer immediately. She reached across the table and took my hand. Yes. Daniel looked away. Okay. It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't approval. But it was a door left open. Mark disappeared from our lives after the legal mess was finally settled. The envelope that had started everything ended up in a locked drawer, forgotten beneath old receipts and warranty papers. Sometimes I thought that was fitting. Something that once felt dangerous had become paperwork. Life does that. It takes the things that scare you and makes them boring if you give it enough time. Claire and I never moved in together. Not yet. She said she liked having her own kitchen. I told her that was because she didn't trust me near the cabinets. She said that was correct. We still met at the park sometimes. The same bench. The same tree. Different conversations. One evening, we sat there sharing a cup of coffee because she'd forgotten to bring 2. You know, she said, I used to think that bench was where everything went wrong. I looked at her. It was where you asked me what I wanted. And you didn't answer. I was scared. You still are. Sometimes. She smiled. Good. Why good? Because it means you still understand what this is worth. I didn't have anything clever to say. So I leaned back against the bench. She rested her hand beside mine. Our fingers touched. Neither of us moved away. We had learned not to rush the quiet parts. That was probably the biggest change. I no longer needed every silence filled. She no longer needed every feeling explained. Sometimes we'd sit together for 20 minutes without speaking. Sometimes we'd argue about groceries. Sometimes she'd steal my coffee and insist hers tasted better. Sometimes I would catch her watching me from across the kitchen, and she'd look away like she hadn't been. We weren't the same people who had sat there 6 months earlier. She had stopped trying to protect me by disappearing. I'd stopped confusing patience with waiting for permission. And somewhere between the old fear and the new routine, we became something neither of us had known how to name. Then one morning at exactly 8:47, Claire looked across the kitchen and said, "I love you." No trembling voice. No dramatic pause. Just the truth. I smiled. "I love you too." She nodded, picked up her tea and said, "Good." That was it. No music. No perfect ending. Just sunlight through the window, 2 cups on the table, and her hand finding mine without either of us thinking about it. Sometimes I still think about the envelope. The empty chair. The park bench. The night she told me not to come back. But the secret that changed our friendship wasn't really what Daniel had hidden. It was what Claire and I had been hiding from ourselves. And now, whenever she looks at me across a quiet room, I know exactly what she means. Stay. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?